So Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin was interviewed on Wednesday about these $1,200 one-time stimulus checks that are going out to some of the people in the U.S., not everybody. And the reporter, I forget which one, you can look up the interview. I'll leave the link to it in the description box. But the reporter's asking, how long do you expect, people to get by with this $1,200 stimulus check from the government? And how long do you think they can, get by with $1,200? And Mnuchin's answer really crystallizes how out of touch most of the people in power in our government truly are, whether it's Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin or people in the Democratic Party like Nancy Pelosi, like Chuck Schumer, like pretty much most of the Democratic leadership, like pretty much all of the Republican Party, to a large extent lots of the Democratic Party as well. And so Mnuchin says, well, I think people can get by for about 10 weeks with this, $1,200, along with the other, benefits and provisions that were provided by this stimulus plan. I mean, Jesus fucking Christ, how completely out of touch with reality do you have to be to think that people in the United States in the year 2020, during a pandemic, when the economy is, 22 plus million people have filed for unemployment in the last month, and the numbers are obviously a lot higher than that. If you even, those are just the people who are able to actually get through to the unemployment offices in these various states. The economy's in shambles. A lot of economists are already saying that we've at least 10, maybe up to 14% unemployment. And was it like the chair of the St. Louis Federal Reserve, the president of that bank, was saying that they thought unemployment could reach 30%, which would be higher unemployment rates than we had during the Great Depression. And Steve Mnuchin is out there just completely disconnected from reality, saying that people could survive for 10 weeks, 2.5 months on $1,200 fucking dollars. Give me a fucking break, Jesus Christ. But then again, Mnuchin, net worth of $300 million. He came from wealth. His father was pretty high up at Goldman Sachs. Mnuchin graduated from Yale. He got a cushy job there, got pretty high up there, did a bunch of other corporate stuff, then went to One West Bank. They foreclosed on a lot of people in some really shady ways during the Great Recession of 2008, 2009. And the Attorney General of California at the time was Kamala Harris. She was the top cop in the state then, Cop Kamala. And what do you know? Since Mnuchin was also a donor to the Democratic Party, she declined to prosecute him. And now he's Trump's Treasury Secretary, spouting off completely unhinged takes about how people can survive for 10 weeks and $1,200 fucking dollars. I saw somebody do the math that equates to like $17 a day. I mean, it's fucking ridiculous. And again, all of the so-called, progressives, Bernie Sanders, AOC, and the like, both of those that I just mentioned, they gave these, fiery speeches about how they were against the corporate bailout portions of the CARES package of that third stimulus plan, yet they voted for it anyway. So, and now they basically, the Democrats, the so-called progressives, the resistance, if we can actually call it that, because at the end of the day, they always end up getting in line and voting for these really shitty policies that disproportionately harm the working people of the United States while propping up the billionaire owner class to the tune of $4.5 trillion no strings attached bailout, while people get this measly, means-tested one-time check that doesn't even go to everybody, and there's Treasury Secretary Mnuchin thinking that's going to be able to hold people over for 2.5 fucking months. I mean, you could tell he's he's never had to struggle. He's never had to live paycheck to paycheck like most people in the United States do. Even before this pandemic happened, 40% of the US population was unable to afford a $400 emergency. 40%. That's what, over close to 150 million people basically, and obviously now that number is much, much higher. And he's thinking, well, yeah, I mean, I've never really had to work a day in my life. I came from a lot of privilege. My family's wealthy, well-connected, powerful. I've never really had to struggle or want for anything, and I'm just assuming everybody else is in that position of privilege, power, and wealth, and Ivy League education. I'm assuming everybody has access to that. This is the type of ethos that pervades these circles in government, and he's just a reflection of that. Again, I mean, the Democratic leadership, I mean, Pelosi went on, was it the Late Show with James Corden or whatever his name is, the English dude who's now the host of the Tonight Show or the Late Show, whatever it is. So she was on there and showing off her fucking stupid ice cream collection and two of her fridges or freezers that cost $11,000 a piece. I mean, the Republican establishment, evidenced by Mnuchin there, as well as the Democratic establishment, are completely out of touch with reality because they aren't living in it. They live in their gated communities. They're able to, self-quarantine as much as need be without worrying how they're going to put food on the table or how they're going to pay their rent or how they're going to pay their mortgage, how they're going to pay their car note, how they're going to pay their electricity bill. All of these things they haven't had to worry about in decades, and definitely in Mnuchin's case, it seems like he hasn't had to worry about any of that stuff in his whole life. And then you take somebody like Pelosi, one of the wealthier members of Congress, I believe, who's worth tens of millions of dollars, and she didn't think it would send any type of message by showing off her $22,000 in fucking refrigerators when 22 million people have lost their jobs in the last 4 weeks, and you're on recess enjoying your quarantine time in your mansion, somewhere in the San Francisco area. And that's obviously why we need to defeat her, get Shahid Buttar elected to Congress, a real, actual human being who will stand up and fight for the working class and not prop up the neoliberal establishment. But anyways, just really, I mean, how nuts is that? But to think that somebody in the United States could survive for 2.5 months on $1,200. I mean, how are you going to do that unless you're literally homeless, living on the street? I mean, for fuck's sake. I live in a pretty expensive part of Washington State, and our rent here for a duplex, we actually get a pretty decent deal. It's like $1,000 a month, and I split the rent cost with my partner. But what if you're a single person and you live in an even more expensive part of King County, like Seattle? You're lucky if you could find a 1-bedroom apartment for $1,000. More likely going to be $12 or $13 or $1,400. That's that $1,200 check right there to your landlord. Boom, it's gone. What does Mnuchin just think you can? Well, I don't know. Then maybe you'll be fine for the other for the other. I mean, Jesus Christ, it is laughable. I don't know what was going through his head. I think he honestly is just so out of touch with reality that his explaining that he thought it was a decent explanation to give, and obviously it revealed how truly out of touch with reality he is, with the conditions that most people in the United States are facing right now are very precarious. There's a lot of misery, death, and suffering going on, both from a public health and an economic perspective, and he thinks $1,200 will tide people over for 2.5 months. It's fucking nuts. Those are my thoughts, anyways. I would love to hear yours in the comment sections down below. Peace. Much love.